In the middle of the alien market, under the harsh sun and noisy crowd, a small girl sat on cold metal. Her arms were chained, her ankles bruised, and her body covered in dirt and cuts. She didn't speak, didn't cry, and didn't even blink. When flies landed on her skin, to everyone around her, she was just trash. They called her rotten meat because of the smell. They said she should have been thrown away long ago. Merchants walked past her, noses turned up, laughing or spitting at the ground. Some pointed and made jokes only a fool would take. That one, others said, she's cursed, can't even speak, not worth a single coin. But still, she sat there, quiet and still, her eyes dull like old glass. She had stopped counting the days, stopped hoping anyone would help. She wasn't even sure if she was alive anymore, only that pain never left her. Her name was long forgotten, even to herself. To everyone else, she was only the stinking one, the mistake, or worse, one day. A new figure entered the market. He wasn't tall like the other aliens, and his skin was soft, pinkish brown, a human. Rare in this part of the galaxy. His name was Terran, and he looked like he was just passing through. He had tools on his belt, dust on his boots, and a quiet calm in his eyes. He walked past rows of fine alien girls, all dressed up and cleaned to be sold. Some waved at him, others tried to look beautiful, but he didn't stop for any of them. Then he saw her, sitting in the corner. Half hidden in shadows, he paused, staring at her for a long moment. The merchants noticed and laughed loudly. "Don't waste your time, human," one of them shouted. "She's not even worth a slap." Another added, "She smells worse than a dead grok beast." Huh. Terran said nothing. He walked closer, the smell growing stronger with every step. Even he flinched for a second, but he didn't stop. He knelt down in front of her, eyes meeting hers. She didn't look up, but she felt something strange. A presence that didn't bring fear. Gently, he reached out. Not to hurt her, but to lift her chin. When she didn't resist, he saw her face clearly. Beneath the dirt and crusted blood were high cheekbones, thin lips, and deep, sad eyes. Not ugly, just broken. "What's your name?" he asked softly. She blinked, confused. No one had asked that before. Her lips trembled, but no words came out. "She doesn't talk," said the merchant. Stepping in, probably mute, or just brain damaged, Terran ignored him. Instead, he looked back at the girl and whispered, "You're not garbage." She flinched. As if the words hurt more than a slap, Terran stood and turned to the merchant. "How much for her?" The crowd laughed louder now. "You serious? 1 credit, even? That's too much." Terran handed over a small chip without a word. The merchant looked shocked. You really want her?" "Yes," he said. "Unchain her." The merchant hesitated, then barked orders at a worker who came with a key. The worker plugged his nose as he removed the chains. The girl didn't move. She thought this was another trick, another cruel joke, but then warm arms wrapped around her gently. Lifting her from the ground, she was weightless in his arms. But he carried her like she was precious. As they walked away, silence fell behind them. No one could believe it. Someone had taken her. The girl's head rested weakly on Terran's shoulder. Her mind spinning. She didn't know who he was or why he had done this, but for the first time in her life, she felt like she might not die tomorrow. Terran carried her through the edge of the colony to a small, quiet home surrounded by trees. He opened the door with his elbow and laid her down on a soft couch. She looked around with weak, glassy eyes. It was warm inside. The air smelled like wood and food, not blood and filth, like the cages. She tried to sit up, but couldn't. Her limbs too weak, Terran knelt beside her again. Wiping her face gently with a damp cloth, she flinched, but didn't pull away. "You're safe now," he whispered. "I'm not going to hurt you." The girl stared at him, mouth trembling. A tear rolled down her cheek. mixing with dirt. And in the softest whisper, she asked, "Why?" Taryn smiled, because no one deserves to be called rotten meat. Asterisk the girl lay still on the couch, her thin frame barely rising with each breath. Taryn moved quietly around the small home, collecting towels, a basin, and fresh clothes. He didn't speak much, but his hands were gentle and calm. The girl's eyes followed him with confusion, fear, and something else, something small. Like wonder, she wasn't used to quiet rooms, only to shouting, chains, and pain. She had never seen someone move without rushing or yelling. Taryn brought warm water and set the basin near her. Steam lifted into the air, filling the room with comfort. He knelt beside her, holding a cloth, and paused. "I'm going to help you clean, all right?" He said softly, "Only if you're okay with it." The girl blinked slowly, unsure what to say. No one had ever asked what she wanted after a few seconds. She gave a tiny nod, so small it could have been missed. Taryn dipped the cloth in the water, wrung it out, and started wiping her arms. She flinched, but not because it hurt. She wasn't used to being touched without cruelty. He said nothing about the smell, not once, even though it made his eyes water. He didn't pull away. He wiped slowly, carefully, watching her skin change from gray-brown to pale purple beneath the grime. Her body was marked with old bruises, sharp burns, and even bite marks. Taryn's eyes tightened at the sight, but he didn't ask. He didn't force her to speak about the past. Instead, he focused on making her feel clean. When he reached her hands, she tried to pull away. Her fingers were cracked, nails chipped, and skin raw. She thought they were too ugly to touch, but he simply took them gently, dipping them in the warm basin, and cleaned each finger like it mattered. "You've been through so much," he said quietly, "but you're here now." The girl stared at him, lips slightly parted, her throat burned from thirst, but she found her voice just barely. "Why are you doing this?" Taryn looked up, surprised she had spoken. He smiled, a real, kind smile. "Because you matter," he said. Even if no one ever told you that before, tears welled up in her eyes. Not loud sobs, just silent streams that mixed with the water on her cheeks. She didn't understand this kindness. It felt like something from a dream she never thought she deserved. Taryn continued, washing her legs, her feet, even behind her. Ears, every spot was treated like it was important. He never made fun of her, never rushed. The whole process took time, and he didn't seem to mind. When he was done, he reached for a soft towel and wrapped her in it. He didn't leave her wet or cold. The warmth from the towel felt like a blanket of safety. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, feeling her body melt into comfort. He helped her into clean, loose clothes, plain but soft. Then he gently lifted her again, cradling her like something precious. She didn't resist this time, only rested her head on his shoulder. Taryn opened a door to a small room with a bed. A real bed with a pillow, blanket, and even a tiny night lamp. He laid her down slowly, pulling the covers over her carefully. Her eyes opened halfway, scanning the room. "This is for me," she whispered. Taryn nodded. "Yes, just for you." The girl reached out a hand, attaching the blanket like it might vanish. I've never had a bed," she said, voice shaking. "You do now," he said, brushing hair from her face. "And no one's going to take it away from you." She stared at the ceiling, blinking fast. Her heart ached not from fear, but from something new, hope. She looked at him, really looked. "You don't even know me," she said quietly. Taryn chuckled softly. "That's all right. You don't smell like death anymore. You smell like someone who survived." That made her pause. She had heard herself called meat, it, thing, but never someone. Taryn stood and walked to the door. "If you need anything, I'll be just outside." As he turned off the light, leaving the soft lamp glowing, she called out. "Wait," he stopped, looking back. "What should I call you?" she asked. "Taryn," he said with a smile. "And you?" She hesitated, eyes wide. She didn't remember her old name, but before she could speak, he said, "We'll find you one. Together?" And with that, he left the door slightly open, not as a jailer, but as someone who wanted her to feel safe. The girl curled into the blanket, her eyes heavy, for the first time in her life. Sleep came not from exhaustion, but from peace. Not in a cage, not in the dirt, but in a bed, soft, warm, hers. The morning light came gently through the window. It touched the soft blanket, the clean sheets, and the girl lying silently under them. She opened her eyes slowly, unsure if she was still dreaming. The bed felt too soft, the room too warm, and her body too light. For a moment, fear crept in. She had felt safety before, only to wake up chained again. But this time, there were no chains, no cold floor, no shouting voices. Only the sound of birds outside and a faint smell of food cooking. She sat up with effort, her muscles sore but no longer burning. Her hands trembled as she touched the blanket. Then her own face. She was still clean. She looked down at the simple shirt and pants. She wore no rags, no metal collar. The door opened slowly, and Taryn stepped in with a tray. He smiled as he saw her awake. "Good morning," he said softly. "I brought breakfast." He placed the tray on a small table beside the bed, then stepped back. The girl looked at the tray: soft bread, cooked vegetables, and a warm drink. Her mouth watered, but she didn't move. "What's wrong?" he asked. Kneeling beside her, she whispered, "Is it really for me?" Taryn nodded. Yes, every bite. She stared at him, then at the food. Slowly, she reached out, hands still shaking. Kane picked up a piece of bread. She brought it to her lips, took a bite, and froze. It was warm, soft, and real. She chewed, slowly. As if her body couldn't believe it was allowed, tears rolled down her cheeks again. But she kept eating, not like a starving beast, but like someone afraid it might vanish. Taryn didn't speak, just sat quietly beside her. When she finished, she looked at him, her voice quiet but clear. "Thank you," he smiled. "You don't have to thank me for every meal." She shook her head. "No one ever gave me food like that, not without." She stopped, her voice breaking. Taryn didn't press her. Instead, he stood and said, "Come, let's stretch your legs a little." She hesitated, but then nodded. He offered his hand, and she took it, slowly climbing out of bed. Her knees wobbled, her feet unsure. But she walked just a few steps before sitting again. Taryn wasn't upset, only said, "That's all right, you'll get stronger every day." And she believed him. He showed her around the small house, a kitchen filled with simple tools, a shelf with old books, a small table with 2 chairs. She stared at everything like it was treasure. "Can I touch?" she asked. "Anything you want," he replied. Her fingers traced the books, the wooden chair, even the walls. It was strange to feel things that didn't hurt. Taryn opened the back door to a small garden. Bright flowers swayed in the breeze, and birds chirped from the trees. The girl stepped outside slowly, her bare feet touching the grass. She gasped. It was soft, cold, and alive. She had never felt the ground like this, not without metal or blood. Taryn smiled as she bent down and touched a flower. "What is this place?" She whispered. "My home," he said. "Now it's yours too." She turned to him, her eyes filled with something new. Not fear, not confusion, but something close to peace. She sat down in the grass, closed her eyes, and breathed in deeply. It was the first real breath she had taken in years. Later that day, she sat at the table as Taryn made soup. He didn't treat her like a burden, didn't ask for anything in return. He just cooked, talked softly, and gave her space to be herself. As they ate together, he asked, "Do you remember your name?" She looked down, then shook her head. I think I lost it a long time ago. Would you like a new one? He asked gently. Her eyes lit up, slowly nodding. He thought for a moment. Then said, How about Laya? Laya, she repeated. It means light, Taryn explained. Because that's what I see when I look at you. She blushed, the first time her face held color. Leah, she said again, trying it on her tongue. A name. A word that meant she was someone. She touched her chest and whispered. I'm Leah? Taryn smiled. Yes, you are. That night, she sat by the window, looking at the stars. She whispered her new name to the sky, again and again. Leah, Leah, Leah. Each time it felt more real, more hers. In the soft light of the room, she curled up on the bed, not like a prisoner, not like trash, but like a girl learning to live, to breathe, to be whole again. The days passed slowly. And every day, Laya grew a little stronger. She still walked with soft steps and spoke with careful words. But now she stood taller, her eyes held more light, and her hands no longer shook when she reached for food. She had a name now, a bed of her own. And someone who didn't flinch when he looked at her. Taryn didn't rush her, didn't expect anything big, but he gave her small tasks, folding blankets, watering flowers, brushing her hair, each time she did something right. He smiled and said, Good work, Leah. And every time he said her name, something inside her grew warmer. Before, she was nothing, a forgotten thing. Now she was Leah. One evening, Taryn sat at the kitchen table, fixing a small broken tool. Leah sat across from him, drawing shapes on paper with a pencil he had given her. Suddenly, she looked up and asked, Can I really be someone new? Taryn set down the tool and leaned forward. Yes, of course you can. But I don't remember anything from before, she said, her voice tight. I don't even know what I was. You were hurt, he said gently. But that's not what you are. You're here now, you're healing, and you're choosing who you want to be. She looked down at the paper again and drew a flower with careful strokes. Then I want to be kind, she said softly, like you. Taryn smiled. Then that's who you are. The next day, she stood in front of the mirror in the small hallway. Her reflection still surprised her: clean clothes, brushed hair, a face that no longer looked like a ghost. She reached up and touched her cheek, then her lips. They moved, forming one word. Laya, she said it again, stronger, Laya. And then she laughed, a soft, surprise sound. She had never heard her own laugh before. Not like that. Later, she helped Taryn cook dinner, stirring the pot while he cut vegetables. You're getting good at this, he said. Soon you'll be better than me, she giggled. Then I'll open a food shop. Taryn raised his brow. A food shop? Yes, she said, pretending to be serious. And I'll charge you double. He laughed loudly, the sound filling the house. It felt good to joke, to smile, to speak without fear. They ate together, and she even asked for seconds. After dinner, she washed the dishes herself and sang a quiet tune she made up on the spot. But not every moment was easy. That night, a bad dream came. She saw chains again, heard laughter, felt the cold floor under her knees. She woke up with a gasp, her body sweating, eyes wide. She looked around. No cage, no whip, only soft blankets and warm walls. She got up and crept to the living room where Taryn was still awake, reading. He looked up, concerned. Nightmare? He asked. She nodded, hugging herself. Without a word, he opened his arms and she walked into them. He wrapped a blanket around her and sat with her in silence. Her head rested on his shoulder as the quiet filled the space. You don't have to fight the past alone, he said gently. I'm here. That night, she fell asleep on the couch beside him, wrapped in peace again. The next morning, she did something she had never done before. She went to the garden alone and picked a small yellow flower. Then she walked to her room, placed it in a little cup of water, and set it on the table beside her bed. It wasn't much, but it was. Hers, her room, her name, her flower. Later that day, while cleaning a shelf, she found a small, broken mirror. She cleaned it and hung it on her wall. Now, every morning, she stood in front of it, looked herself in the eyes, and said, "Good morning, Leah," at first. It felt strange, but slowly it became part of her healing. One afternoon, while sitting under the trees, Taryn asked, "If you could choose your own story, how would it begin?" Leah thought for a long moment, then answered, "It would start with a girl in chains, forgotten by everyone." But then, she added, "A strange man came and told her she had a name." She didn't believe him at first, but little by little, she began to see who she could become. Taryn nodded. "That's a good story." She smiled. It's still being written, and she was right. Because every smile, every step, every moment she chose to live was a new word in. Her story, a story not of filth or shame, but of rebirth, of hope, and a name that finally belonged to her. Leah stood in the garden, the sun warming her skin. She held a basket full of herbs and vegetables, freshly picked. Her steps were steady now, her shoulders straight. Each day, she walked a little taller, smiled a little more, breathed a little easier, but outside the small home, beyond the flowers and peace, the colony still whispered. They hadn't forgotten who she was or who they thought she was. She was the one from the pit cages. Someone muttered, "The rotten girl." Another sneered. Now she plays house with a human. Word had spread faster than wildfire, that a human took in the one no one wanted, the one that smelled like death. Some called it foolish, others called it dangerous. They said she must have tricked him, cast a spell, or hidden some dark truth. Leah didn't hear all of it, but she felt it, the stares when she walked near the market, the way merchants pulled their goods away when she passed. Even the children were told not to look at her one afternoon. Taryn brought her to the nearby supply station to help pick tools. It was her first time walking openly in the colony. She held his hand tightly, her eyes scanning every face. The whispers started the moment they entered. Is that her? She should be locked up, not walking free. Can't believe he lets her wear real clothes. Taryn heard it too, but said nothing. He only squeezed her hand gently, a reminder that he was right there. Still, Leah's chest tightened. Her steps slowed, her confidence cracked at one stall. A guard leaned close and stared at her hard. "You shouldn't be here," he said coldly. "She's with me." Taryn replied, keeping calm. The guard didn't back down. "Doesn't matter. She's trash." Leah flinched, stepping behind Taryn, her hand trembling. But before she could hide fully, Taryn stepped forward. He looked the guard in the eye and said, "Say that again, and you'll be the one thrown out." Gasps followed, the crowd pausing in silence. No one had ever defended her like that. The guard scowled but backed off, not wanting trouble. Taryn turned to Leah and said softly, "You did nothing wrong. Don't let them break what you're building." She nodded, her lips tight, tears forming, but she didn't cry. She kept walking with him, still holding his hand. She wasn't used to being defended, but now she knew what it felt like. It was strange, but powerful. That night, she sat quietly on the couch, staring into the fire. Taryn made tea and sat beside her. "You okay?" he asked. She took a long breath before answering. "I thought I was strong now," she said. "But today, their words still hurt." Taryn nodded. "Being strong doesn't mean not hurting, Leah. It means you keep standing even when it does." She looked at him, voice barely a whisper. "Will they ever see me differently?" "Maybe," he said. "Maybe not. But how they see you isn't who you are." She took a sip of tea and closed her eyes. His words stayed in her heart long after the fire died down. The next morning, she made a decision. She wouldn't hide anymore. She tied her hair back, put on her clean clothes, and walked to the market alone. Taryn watched from the garden, not stopping her, but ready if she needed him. Laia walked slowly, eyes forward, shoulders steady. Some people stepped aside. Others whispered, but she didn't run, didn't cry, didn't look down. At one stall, an older alien woman stared at her. Leah waited for a rude comment, but instead, the woman said, "You walk better than most of them." Laia blinked, surprised. "Thank you," she said softly, and the woman added, "You smell like fresh soap now," then turned back to her fruit. Laia almost laughed. It wasn't praise. Exactly, but it wasn't hate either. It was a crack in the wall. A sign that maybe, just maybe, things could change. She returned home and told Taryn everything. He smiled proudly and said, "Next time, we go together again." She nodded. But this time, her smile came easier, more natural. That night, she stood in front of her small mirror and whispered, "They still see the old me, but I know who I am. I am Laia." And for the first time, she truly believed it. The morning started quiet. Just the way Laia liked it. She stepped outside. With bare feet and stretched her arms to the sky, birds flew overhead, and the wind carried the soft scent of flowers from her little garden. This was her space now, her safe world, and she was starting to believe she belonged here. Taryn watched her from the doorway with a cup of tea in his hand. "You're up early," he said. Laia turned to him and gave a small smile. "I had a good dream," she said. "About what?" "About nothing chasing me," she answered. "Just peace." They spent the morning cleaning, laughing, and working together. She helped him fix an old wooden chair, tightening screws and sanding the edges. She didn't know much about tools, but she asked questions and learned quickly. Taryn was patient, always explaining things without raising his voice. After lunch, they sat outside under a tall tree where the sun didn't burn. Taryn leaned back with his eyes closed, enjoying the breeze. Leah watched butterflies float between the flowers she had planted with her own hands. She leaned closer and asked, "Why did you make this home so far from the others?" Taryn opened one eye and looked at her. "I guess I never liked too much noise," he said. "And I always wanted a quiet place to think." "Do you miss them?" she asked. "Sometimes," he replied, "but I don't feel alone." Leah looked at him and felt something strange: comfort, warmth, maybe even happiness. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small rock, painted with a flower on it. "I made this," she said shyly. "For you." Taryn took it carefully, studying the paint and smiling. "It's beautiful," he said. "Thank you, Laia." She looked down, her face a little red. "I thought maybe I could make more, maybe sell them." "That's a wonderful idea," he said. "People like beautiful things, and you have a good eye." Laia nodded, already thinking about designs in her head. She had never made anything before. Never had the chance. Now, with her hands clean and her heart open, she wanted to create. That evening, something rare happened. 3 alien children wandered past the house, chasing a ball. It rolled into the garden and stopped near Laia's feet. The children froze, unsure whether to run or speak. Laia picked up the ball and walked toward them slowly. She could see fear in their eyes, the kind she once had when others looked at her. She bent down, offered the ball, and said, "It's okay, you can play." The oldest child stepped forward and took it carefully. "Are you really the rotten girl?" he asked. Laia paused, then smiled. Not with pain, but peace. "I used to be," she said, "but now I'm just Laia." The child looked surprised, then gave a small nod before running off with the others. Taryn, who had watched from a distance, clapped once slowly. "You handled that like a queen," he joked. Leah laughed, and this time, not a quiet giggle, but a bright, full laugh that echoed across the garden. Taryn froze, eyes wide, then slowly smiled. "That's the first time I've heard that," he said. "What?" she asked, still giggling. "Your real laugh," he said. "You sound—" Free Leah looked down, touching her chest. "I think I am," she whispered. They spent the rest of the evening sitting on the porch, talking about little things, books, recipes, and what stars might taste like if they were candy. As the sky turned orange, Leah leaned her head on Taryn's shoulder. "You changed me," she said. "No," he said softly. "You changed yourself. I just gave you a safe place to do it." She thought about that for a while, then asked, "Do you think others like me could change too?" "Think they're waiting for someone like you to help them," he answered. She looked up at the sky again. "Filled with new ideas, I want to make a place," she said suddenly. "A place like this. For others who have nothing." Taryn looked at her with pride. "Then that's what you'll do," he said, "and I'll help." She smiled, this time with no fear, no doubt. The same girl who once sat in chains and dirt was now dreaming of helping others stand. She didn't just want to survive anymore, she wanted to lift others with her. And it all started with one bath, one bed, and one human who looked at her and said, "You're not garbage." Months had passed, and the seasons on the colony world had shifted. The leaves in Leah's garden now carried golden colors, dancing in the cool breeze. The house was no longer just a quiet home, it had become something more. A place where warmth lived, where laughter echoed, and where healing began. It started with one child, a small alien girl who stood outside the gate, staring with wide, frightened eyes. Her clothes were torn, her arms bruised, and her spirit broken. Leah saw herself in that child immediately. She stepped outside, knelt down, and opened her arms. The girl hesitated, but then ran forward. Clinging tightly to her, Leah whispered, "You're safe now. You're not alone anymore." Taryn helped prepare a second bed. They gave her food, clean clothes, and a warm bath just like Leah had once been given. The child didn't speak for days, but that didn't matter, because Leah understood. After her came another, then another. One child, one teen. Even a quiet old alien woman who had nowhere else to go. Leah welcomed them all, not with big speeches, but with small kindnesses. A meal, a blanket, a name. They began calling the house the Light Home, because broken ones came in carrying darkness, and, left with hope. The colony watched from a distance at first, unsure, but it was hard to ignore the change. The same girl they once called rotten meat now stood strong with a group around her. She walked the market with her head high, children clinging to her sides. She bought bread, tools, and paint with credits she earned by selling handmade crafts. Merchants who once looked away now greeted her with nods, some even with smiles. One day, the same guard who insulted her before came to the gate. He didn't speak at first, just looked at the children playing in the garden. Then he said, "My sister. She's sick. No one's helping her." Leah nodded. "Bring her," she said. "We'll do what we can." The guard lowered his head, ashamed, and walked away quietly. Taryn watched all of it unfold with quiet pride. He didn't lead, he simply stood beside her, helped fix broken walls, and cooked extra meals. It wasn't his voice people followed, it was Leah's. Not because she shouted, but because she listened. One evening, as the stars blinked above, Leah stood with the children. On the porch, one of them, a little boy with green eyes, tugged at her shirt and asked, "Is it true they used to call you rotten?" Leah smiled, gently nodding. "Yes, they did," she said. "But they were wrong." "What changed?" he asked. She looked at him, then at the others. "You know what changed?" she said softly. "Someone looked at me and didn't see garbage. They saw me even when I couldn't see it myself. And then?" the boy asked. "Then I started to believe it too." She knelt in front of them, her hands open. "And now I want you all to remember this: what they call you doesn't matter. What you believe about yourself, That's the truth." The children hugged her all at once, and she laughed, a sound full of joy and life. Later that night, she sat beside Taryn as the fire crackled softly. He handed her a cup of tea and said, "You did all this, Leia." She shook her head gently. "We did it together, but it was your light that made it grow." He said, "You could have stayed quiet, hidden, but instead, you stood up, and others followed." Leia thought for a moment, then said, "I was once a girl in chains. No name, no bed, and no reason to hope. And now? I have all three, and more." Outside, one of the younger girls watered the plants. Singing softly, another read a book on the steps, her feet swinging happily. This place, this home, wasn't just about shelter. It was about starting again. Leia looked up at the stars and whispered, "I used to think I was rotten meat, not even worth saving. But you proved them wrong," she said to Taryn. "And then you let me prove it to myself." He placed a hand on hers and nodded. "And now," she added, "I'll spend the rest of my life proving it to others." That night, as she walked through the quiet house, she passed each room. Every bed was full, every heart resting. At the end of the hallway, she paused at a door and looked at the name carved into it. Leia's room. She touched the wood and smiled. From nothing, she had become someone. From filth, she had become light. And from a forgotten cage, she had built a home where no one would ever feel forgotten again.